Hello, this is TurboDog for the RPG Limit Break submissions, hopping back into it with Shining Force EXA. We did a slight split in the video because apparently I was dropping some frames, but we're going to continue on now. We might do 3 videos of about 2 hours apiece, just to keep this nice and succinct. But let's continue. So we warp over to the Lightning Ancient Arena. The Aurora Bow that we have on with Avalon Nova is going to make quick work of the lightning-based creatures in here. Funny enough, most of them are winged creatures. Bows tend to have very high coefficients against winged creatures or flying creatures, so that's just a little bonus, not necessarily important. We're going to go to the bottom section here. The boss is right next to us. It's a green dragon. We're going to freeze him with Avalon Nova and then dump damage into him. But because Falkland did a spread shine attack and Maybell immediately shot him, we actually didn't even need to petrify him. So that was pretty nice. Saved a tiny bit of time. So by doing these ancient arenas, we are recouping the mithril that we invested in physical offense. And we can reinvest that into light magic and defense. Another nice thing about this is lightning we are doing earlier than expected. We obviously did steel way earlier than we were supposed to. We are going to kind of continue that trend with some of these other ones. Giants we could have done with Toma before we entered the cave, but as mentioned, we will be able to do it much faster now that our companions and Cyril are kind of super powered. We do still kind of be a little careful inside the giant arena. Because we don't have a ton of defense, and giants can hit relatively hard. So we don't want to be too flippant with our approach to these maps. Might even make a save before going into this bottom section for that reason. So there's a good example of the crits happening when the giant was petrified. Giant has pretty quick petrification recovery, so it didn't stay up for too long. But we got the hits that we needed. Next, we're going to be going to the Stalker Ancient Arena that we picked up with Toma just recently. You'll notice we're not picking up the core metal and the power art stones in some of these places. That's because, again, they'd just be clogging up our inventory to some extent. So, Stalker Arena. The first floor is pretty safe. Definitely would save in between floors. The scary thing about stalkers is they are underground to start with, and when they pop up from underground, they tend to knock you up and stun you, and when you're in a floating or stun state, you tend to take increased damage. Their damage is partially physical and partially dark magic. So because of that, we need to be kind of careful with how we approach them so that we don't get juggled to death. Because again, we are fighting things that are still much like we're supposed to be fighting this arena probably in chapter 10 or so. So we're doing it a significant portion earlier as far as our gear is concerned. Even if our levels are sufficient, our gear hasn't necessarily caught up to our levels except the special gear that we got inside of Steel Arena. There's a good example. We got slapped by one of the Dark Stalkers. I think that was the boss and it hit us for 50% of our health. You'll notice also that some of these Darkstalkers are using Chaos Gate. That is an AoE dark magic spell that can petrify you. The combination of Petrify plus something with high attack damage and auto crits means that Cyril could die inside of here. So that's why you would want to make a save. But as you can see, with the way we move and the way we adjust to that, we make Stalker Arena relatively safe. Pretty much the main way you can die there is a bad Chaos Gate into a hit, or if you get juggled to death at the very beginning, which is somewhat unlikely. Gonna backtrack to the Wolfling Ancient Arena. This one you could do around this time, normally at the beginning of the chapter, but it's a little bit dangerous, and it's better to just wait on Cyril to get her power spike, and then take her to this place. So yeah, just kind of clearing this first floor to get access to the second, and then we're going to clear out the Wolfling Berserker Captain here. So very similar to Neo, by doing large amounts of these ancient arenas, we cut out the necessity to kind of run all over the map, getting more and more power. We used to spend significantly more time in Chapter 6 running around to different areas, so much so that it was a genuine concern that we might get a defensive battle during our harvesting of mithril and gear. But now, even though we're doing a lot right now, like we're doing a lot of these ancient arenas, we're still not really in any danger of accidentally activating a defensive battle. So if we did the fire build first, we wouldn't necessarily... How would I put it? If we got the fire build, we wouldn't necessarily do all of these in the same order. We might end up holding off on certain ancient arenas until later in the game. The ones I've done so far, I can do with the fire route as well, since, as you saw, I was using the bow for most of them anyway at this point. Later on, we will run into a couple of arenas in stone and worms, where we would wait a little bit longer to address those particular Legion, or not Legion hives, ancient arenas, until later on. So now that we're shifting to Cyril, we need to make sure that she has her secret arts on, including Quicksilver, to increase her movement speed. So here we're going to try to push as hard as we can to get light magic up. Because of how powerful Gaia Codex is, and our effective power at this point, we actually don't need to optimize our points for casting right now. So we're going to try to cap off level 1 through 4 on light, and then we can kind of trade points between 5 and 6, whichever one is cheaper at the time. And you're going to start to see the broken nature of the Gaia Codex here. So Gaia Codex has a few spells. It has Gaia Nova 2 and 3, and the spell you're seeing here, which is Holy 2. Holy 2 is a multi-pulsing, pretty much screen-clearing effect. It also knocks opponents up as well. So very, very good for AoE, CC, damage, controllability. It's relatively cheap on magic as well. Here we're using Gaia Nova in order to clear these boxes. Boxes are determined basically by hits, not really damage. Gaia Nova, I believe it does... I think it's 6 hits at level 2 and 9 hits at level 3. And it shoots a long beam, like you saw there, all the way across the screen. And it hits multiple times. The one downside to Gaia Nova is that it doesn't pierce. Like, it does individual hits, and once those hits are gone, then it can't continue on. So because of that reason, and because it's a straight line, you will see us using Holy far more often than not in order to clear places. However, Gaia Nova is the stronger ability against single targets. So when we need extra single target damage, we will invest in shooting a Gaia Nova. We'll also be using Gaia Nova to break most obstacles inside of the game. Because again, not based on damage, based on hits. So if you don't break the right statue in these areas, they spawn a bunch of enemies. However, these breaks are consistent, so we don't need to worry about spawning the wrong guy. And I mean, you can see really how strong Maybell and Falkland are here. Like, they just wiped the boss there instantly before I could even cast a spell. So, unlike in Neo, where your companions are mostly useless, they do have some use, but not that much. In EXA, they're actually really strong for quite some time. Eventually, you'll hit the point where your main character is just going to be doing mostly everything. But having the extra damage or an extra heal here or there from Maybell or Falkland can also help. I guess that is something to mention, is that both Maybell and Falkland can heal. Falkland has a much higher rate of healing, but Maybell can as well. Earlier on, we picked up a magical archer ability, and later on we'll be picking up a couple ability tomes for both Maybell and Falkland again. So one of the other improvements I find for this game over Neo is in Neo, your characters gained abilities based on their level, and if they got promoted. Once they got promoted, they usually got different abilities or different attack animations. In this game, you don't have promotions, but what you can do is you can equip special ability kits inside of the status screen, and that can change what abilities your compatriots have, what they use, and what they prioritize on using. They can also add defensive bonuses as well, like a plus 30% defense that will be on Falkland later on. So a lot better way to customize your team as well, comparative to Neo. So once again, EXA is a fixed Neo. More combat complexity, more consistency, more ways to recover out of a bad build, all these things. All right, so continuing on here, we're just making our way up the ziggurat here in Ramber's tomb. At the top of the ziggurat, we're going to run into, I think this is actually the blue metal. Funny thing about this, once we reach the top 4 of the blue metal, you're going to see me return and get Toma. If you try to pick up the blue metal with Cyril, she kind of freaks out and is like, I don't want to pick it up. And it's kind of weird and out of nowhere, but what that's supposed to do is it's because you're supposed to be controlling Toma for the next story sequence. So they try to kind of force you onto the character with that in mind. Inside of this room is where we can gain access to Fire 4. It's up that little staircase there. Since we have light magic for this particular run, we will not be picking it up. If we did fire magic, we would definitely pick it up, and that's how we would gain access to level 4 and 5 fire magic. Specifically, we would be using Toma to leapfrog through Fire 4 to get access to Fire 5. That way you could optimize purchasing points from the Force Art with Cyril to get the most effective fire magic. So even though we have access to better stuff for Toma, we don't really pick it up. Ninja Clothes gives us high ranks of speed, which whenever we do need to control Toma, we're just running from one side of the Geofortress to the other oftentimes. And we aren't going to need to attack anything until into Chapter 14. Once we get into Chapter 13, we are going to improve his armor, and it won't be until Chapter 14 that we really start actually improving things on Toma. It's not that we're going to be playing Toma significantly, but he is going to have a small section where we have to play as him. Good old Baybell over there. With her level 118 stats. But yeah, just kind of moving on with the story here. So in this one chapter, we have essentially completed 5, I believe, 5 different ancient arenas, gotten 100 levels on our companions, about 60 levels on Cyril, and we've gotten access to high-level weapons and magic. So, big chapter, huge break. Cannot thank Norn's fan club enough for tipping me off on this. I was pretty skeptical about it because I thought for sure that Crush wouldn't be a consistent item property. But it turns out it's not the worst in the world to manipulate. Like, items sold by Borne and their attributes tend to be related to the chapter you're on. So, like, as you gain more and more chapters, he tends to sell stronger and stronger attributes on gear. So, the Crush attribute is something that's relatively common at this point in the game. I guess not common, it's uncommon, but definitely not rare, which is the important thing. All right. So a little bit of running back and forth here inside of EXA, inside the Geofortress. So basically, as far as the story is concerned, Cyril's like, "You're an idiot. Do you even understand why you're getting all this metal? Like, why do you think the Geofortress needs to be this strong?" And he's like, "I don't know, so somebody can become king of the world." And he's like, she's like, "You're an idiot." The Geofortress needs to become this powerful because it's supposed to be a tool to fight Malzatra, the great evil. And she goes like, "You're just out for this for yourself." And like, or at least that's her perception of it. She doesn't outwardly say that. But then she learns Toma's like, "I just wanted to become king so all this fighting would end." And what you learn is that Toma's people, the barbarian nomads, his tribe gets wiped out in the crossfire between the War of the Magnus and the Noswald Empire. So because of that, his, again, just one of those, I mentioned how the storytelling isn't great and some of the characters are kind of cringy, but just moments like that where you have good characterization of characters and strong development of both themes and motivations for a character. And those are places where I think you can find some diamonds in the rough, if you will, for Shining Force EXA in its story. So with the blue medal, we're able to cure Duga, who recovers. Amataliri is pretty infatuated with Duga. Curiously attractive for a werewolf man. But yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. Like everybody remarks on how handsome Duga is. It's kind of silly. So at this point, we're going to swap back to Cyril because we don't even want to deal with Toma at this point. Cyril is going to go over and identify some items. You'll notice we aren't identifying everything. This is the point at which we are determining if it is worthwhile to identify as opposed to sell. At this point, we buy a magic chain. So there's edge chain, platinum chain, and magic chain at this point. Edge chain increases your physical attack. Platinum gives you the most effective defense on a shield. Magic gives you the most magic resistance and improves your magic power. So, depending on what you're trying to do and how strong you are at certain times, you might get a platinum chain or you might get a magic chain at this point. We are holding on to Aurora Bow and the Edge Chain because later on we will use the Aurora Bow in 2 other areas in this game before we can get rid of it. And that's because there are going to be certain enemies that are going to be immune to our light magic, so we will need to use the bow in order to deal with them. We would also be using the bow similarly if we had the fire route, because there would be some enemies that we couldn't fight with fire. And we wouldn't be able to push into a different type of magic at certain times. So right now, we are going to go to Gradium Mine, which we have been informed apparently the people of Cantore village have been kidnapped and sent to work in Gradium Mine by the Noswald Empire. And Toma's like, "Wow, Ragnadom's a jerk. He's just literally enslaving his own people and sending them to the mithril mines." And both Duga and Gadford are like, "We're pretty sure that's not what's happening." But he's like, "No, that's clearly what's happening." So, nice little dragon here that we fight. And you can see, like, Cyril's already gotten a pretty heavy defensive spike from investing in Master Guard, so that slap from the dragon didn't really even phase her that much. Using Gaia Nova there to break the mithril deposit, because the multi-hits also help when breaking mithril crystals. I do think mithril crystals also have a threshold of HP. Later on, you will actually see me be able to cast Holy 2 and break the mithril instantly, but that won't be for quite some time. Right now, we're kind of relegated to using Gaia Nova. And I mean, you can see this, like, I am just mowing down these enemies. Like, golems have pretty decent magic resist, and I can just instantly kill them. All of these wolf guys, bam, dead. You know, it's that simple. If I had fire, all of these guys are weak to fire as well. So I could turn on the Inferno spell to give me a fire elemental based shield and just run around killing things as I pass them. That is one advantage that the fire spell does have, or the fire route. By having Inferno, which is an elemental shield, you can just turn it on and run to wherever you need to go. With the light route, you need to stop to cast magic. So you need to stop, pulse holy, and then continue on. This is the ancient ice arena. We can stop by this and clear it out pretty easily. Again, if we had firepower, this would also be a breeze. We do choose to do certain ancient arenas, not just because they're convenient to get to, but also some of them provide more mithril as a reward, or a good item, or a good force art or secret art as a reward. In this case, we get a lot of mithril for very little investment in time. Also, the chest there, the secret art is Frost Nucleus, which if we got the fire route, we would want to have Frost Nucleus in order to improve our ice magic power for the couple times where that would be relevant. So originally how this route had developed was we didn't have access to the in-game weapons, but at this point, we actually did the leapfrog tactic to make our fire magic very strong. And what we would do is we would use a blaze bow, which is a bow with a fire property. That bow, its charge attack was what's a spell called Blazing Feather. Blazing Feather creates a fan of individual fire missiles, something like a dozen of them. And if you do the supercharged attack, it just does this insane spread shot that shoots like 30 firebolts. So very, very strong. The funny thing is even though it's a weapon creating this effect, it is still impacted by your fire magic. Unfortunately, the attack power isn't. Like if you just shoot the bow, it's not going to do a ton of damage. But you can just use the charge attacks, and that used to be our method for gaining huge amounts of damage at this point. Using that tactic, we were able to still spike down certain bosses and certain of the generators as well, which is pretty nice. Another nice thing about Holy is you can see it can kind of bypass barriers to hit targets. So Gradium Mine, we are going to start running into Samurai again. These Samurai are going to be something that's going to be quite dangerous for us. So this is another section of the game where we do need to make safety saves to be careful for a marathon. The Samurai here do quite a bit of damage on their own, but their critical rate is just through the roof. Like, even with the 100% reduction on crit, we're still very likely to take a critical attack. And the Gold Samurai that we're about to run into does between 70 and 90% health in a single attack. There are Samurais near the very end of Gradium Mine that have actually one-shot me. Even with relatively high defense. It's just their multiplier on their damage from crit is so high. It's insane. So getting a good Angel Wing armor would have been nice there, but we could tell from the amount that it was going to break for that it wasn't going to have good attributes on it, so we just sell it off. The nice thing about Angel Wings is Angel Wings give you speed, but they also have a higher defense value than the Witch's Robes I currently have on. Nice thing about Witch's Robe is it has some increase to your magic damage, but it's not super relevant. So we take the time to make sure that we still have our crit reduction on. We improve our defense as much as we can, and we improve our magic damage to make sure that we have enough magic damage to spike down generators. In particular, this first generator that we're going to run into, I guess I'll cover that when we hit it. But in particular, the first generator you hit is very durable. So yeah, nice little pulse. That gold samurai is shielded, but since we did so much damage to it so quickly, the regeneration couldn't kick in because we did over 100% of its HP in a single attack. So again, even though samurai are dangerous, having holy to pulse and crowd control also assists with that problem. Now, that being said, this particular run, I died in this place in a rather goofy way, but I can kind of talk about it a little bit. This is the first generator I was talking about. We spike it down using Gaia Nova. If you have enough spell power, you could kill it with Gaia Nova 2. I usually just run Gaia Nova 3 because I am guaranteed to break it with that. Couple more generators here. We break these more to reduce lag than we do in order to stop them from hurting us. Make a small detour for a little bit of a mithril store here. That gives a fair amount. Break through these boxes and continue on. So what happens here for this death is I end up getting hit for a large amount by the Berserker here. My defense is a little bit lower than I would like at this point, and the Berserker Wolves, as you can see, can still do pretty appreciable damage. What happens here, though, is I'm a little flippant with healing, and not only do I get hit multiple times by the wolves, I actually catch a bad hitbox on that exploding icicle. And the combination of those two guys hitting me and critting, and the hit from the spike hitting me from further away than it really should have, ended up killing me, which is unfortunate, but recoverable. Again, that's why we make these saves. I can say that that definitely wasn't something that I knew was kind of dangerous, but in retrospect, I should have, because again, like I said, normally I have a Angel Wing on, and Angel Wing would give me better defense than the Witch's Robe. If I had to tackle it again, I'd probably just take, and I think I do it here, I think I take a little bit more time clearing the werewolves than normal. Just after that bridge, you're also going to see the huge samurais that I was talking about, the ones that can do over 100% of your health bar. Definitely would want to make a save before going past to them as well. Because if they happen to swing just exceptionally fast before you can get your holy off, then they could hit you and kill you. So a little bit more careful here. You'll see I stop, clear them, and they even tried their best there, even. Like, they actually got kind of close there as well, but we were a lot more careful with how we approached it. So we're shooting a couple Gaia Novas across the gap there because there's another gate. And here are going to be the samurai that I was referring to. Not this spawn, but the next. So what I did there is I teleport back to make the save. Not only because the samurai are dangerous, but because I heard them activate. So what happened is because I had to stop and cast that second Holy 2, they ended up activating before I was able to run into range to deal with them. So I didn't feel comfortable engaging them at that point. So I just took the safety save. Much better to be safe than sorry. And in this case, sorry means dead. So there they are. And like I said, you can kill them in one hit, but they can do the same to you. This is an Arch Lotus here, giant robot that can attack. He does pretty okay damage as well, but he can't really insta-kill you. You have a lot of healing. And if you have the light magic build like I have right now, I'm actually going to spike him through his regeneration and kill him instantly. With fire, you would have to clear his minions before killing him. That being said, yeah, see, I didn't have quite enough magic here to be able to spike him. So I clear the enemies with AoE, and then I can go ahead and kill him afterward. You'd use a similar prospect for fire if you had to do the fire route. And in any case, even if you don't get to spike down the boss, that's still a very quick thing because your AoE is so powerful at this point that you can clear his minions very quickly. So Philip here. We learned that Duga was poisoned by Philip, and that allowed him to go crazy and get mind controlled. So now in order to get payback for turning Duga crazy and enslaving the people of Cantore, Duga mercilessly cuts off his clothes, and that's kind of it. Kind of anticlimactic for the enslavement of an entire race of people, I think. We hit the Power Art Stone there for Quick Swing 2, which is again going to increase attack speed. That'll be not super relevant, but relevant for a couple fights. We also picked up a hidden key stack that was next to a robot in the back there. So now we talk to the elder of the Cantore village, Yosef, and head back. So I guess this is a good time to mention something. Probably half of the assets and places inside of Neo are directly lifted from, in EXA are directly lifted from Neo. What they did to change them up is they might change like where a ramp is, or they might have blocked off a section, but they're the same maps. So because of that, I mentioned how showing Tai through the first part of the route would be exceptionally easy because since he's already played Neo and speedrun it, he knows these maps. It's just he has to learn where the little changes are between the two games. But yeah, a lot of music is lifted too, a lot of enemies and animations. Again, it's a fixed Neo. Even the Cantore village is a village that you visit inside of Neo, and it has the dominion to beast people as well. Now you might say, does that mean that the two games are connected? I mean, I pulled out the murder board, with all the pictures and like yarn attached to thumbtacks. I scribbled a bunch of notes. I had multiple chalkboards and whiteboards, built extensive models based on a space-time continuum, and I'm pretty sure that they have nothing to do with one another. Like, the amount of things that would have to be weird or changed or different or occur in a different way in order for this universe to coexist with Neo's, it just doesn't make any sense. So, short answer, no, they aren't related. Long answer, they aren't related, but they should be, based on how many things are the same. So Rimshion tries to seduce Toma into having him use the Shining Force for the Magnus inside of Fearlent. Says, just go ahead and wipe out all the humans, it'll be great. And Toma's like, no. And then he goes inside after almost getting his soul burned to cinders by this extremely powerful Magnus. And Cyril's like, oh, you were probably going to make out with her. And just being super jealous and soon. It's kind of ridiculous. All right. So the next thing that happens, spurned, Rimshion commissions her handmaiden Lernazel to excavate an ancient weapon. And this ancient dragon cannon fires on the Geofortress and gets a direct hit and shuts down the power. In order to do repairs to the Geofortress, Zenith says, hey, you gotta go to Dimension X. And in Dimension X, you must find the silver metal. And another colored metal is going to assist in repairing all the functions of the Geofortress that were damaged. Before that, we kind of run around the base after the impact. Everybody got kind of thrown around. Need to make sure they're okay. Check in on Cyril and Baybel. Say hi to the good boy Duga. And then make our way to engineering, where we'll find Amataleri, Gadfert, and Falklad. So, now that we know we need to go into Dimension X, Zenith goes, well, in order to get to Dimension X, you have to have access to Shining Force's power. Tomy goes, well, that's easy. I have Shining Force's power. And Cyril's like, you're an idiot. I'm going to my room. Then, for some reason, Zenith says, what you need to do is you need to talk to Cyril now. And you're not exactly sure why. But it's kind of an odd thing, right? So Toma has the Shining Force. So why is Cyril even able to fight these things if she doesn't have access to the awesome, magnificent, almost endless energy provided by Shining Force in combat? Like, how is she able to fight against the enemies that Toma is supposed to deal with? And there's a reason. But first, we're going to have Toma follow Cyril to her room and onto the roof. And on the roof, they'll be able to look down on Yale Village, and they kind of briefly reflect on their time together on the search for Shining Force. And Toma remarks like, yeah, it's only, a few scant days ago, I was just traveling the world looking for Shining Force, meeting friends, living with constant danger, and, like, having fun with friends. And now I got a Geofortress and Shining Force. And now 2 rulers of empires want to kill me. And she goes, aren't you afraid? And he's like, well, yeah, you'd have to be stupid not to be afraid of Malzatra, right? And if we are going to have to confront him, then that's a huge problem. So Cyril seems pretty pleased by that. And you go to the entrance to Dimension X. And Zenith goes, go ahead and place your hand on the door, Master. So he does, and Shining Force manifests and starts to unlock the door. As he does that, Cyril puts her hand up against the door, and it turns out that the book inside of her left hand in her chains are also Shining Force. The Shining Force is a sword that was split into 2 pieces, and each of the individual pieces is needed to unlock the awesome power of Shining Force that's mentioned in Legends. This is corroborated in the first mural of the game, actually, where the hero that's fighting Balzatra seems to have a sword in both of their hands. So what's kind of odd about that, though, is if Cyril pulled her Shining Force and Toma pulled his Shining Force, why does it seem like there's a single hero and they have 2 swords? But we'll get into that a little bit later. So Dimension X. Dimension X is like ordeals inside of Shining Force Neo. What it is 10 floors, it's 10 floors of Dimension X. 8 of those floors are randomly generated. Now, the random generation does have a couple of commonalities based on the floors, and I'll kind of talk about those as we get into them. But floor 5 is always going to be an orc boss that you need to fight, and floor 10 is always going to be a Balrog, a flame demon. For right now, we are trying to raise up our defense to make sure that Cyril is going to be well prepared for her trek into Dimension X. We have quite a bit of damage right now, so we're not too worried about our damage output. This is a place where Fire Route can potentially gain a good portion of time. You are strictly limited by luck. Like, if you don't find the exit to the floor quickly, you can lose a lot of time. I do recall this run having rather poor luck on Dimension X and later on the Ordeals. But if you have fire as your main element, you can use your fire elemental shield to just run through things. Oftentimes, as I'm moving through this section, you'll see me have to stop to pulse holy to clear boxes or crates or kill enemies. Fire, you could just turn it on, run through everything, and then every 20 or 15, 20 seconds or so, turn it back on again. So elemental shields last a lot less time, I think, in EXA compared to Neo, but they're still quite useful for that reason, maintaining full run speed and just passing by enemies and killing them. Also breaking breakable material so that you don't have to stop and clear it yourself. I think if you were talking about ideal runs, I played with the idea that if you could get it to manipulate quickly enough, you could get a Gaia Codex and Volcanon logs. And in that case, you would run Fire early to be able to have full run speed while clearing the early parts of the game. And then later on, you would transition into Light Magic much earlier than you would normally have access to it. If you did that, then you would have 3 magic types you would take. You'd go Light, Fire, and Dark. And you would have a much easier time going through Dimension X with Fire and going through Ordeals with Fire. In addition, you'd be able to move through certain areas where you didn't need to spike bosses with full run speed and Inferno running. You'd be running Light in that case specifically to spike down problematic bosses and mini-bosses and for your late game. That being said, obviously that requires quite a bit of luck because you'd have to manipulate out both books to drop. And for the premise of RPG Limit Break, we can take Fire, we can take Light. Either one of those is fine, and we can kind of adjust from there. So I'm basically just trying to navigate. At the beginning of each floor, and sometimes periodically, you'll see me consult my map. That's just so I'm trying to browse where my potential routes to an exit could be. Another nice thing is if you get close enough to certain walls, you can sometimes kind of see through them using the map. So you might potentially spot the exit at a side room, and once you know the exit's position, you can kind of backwards engineer your way to it. So this is floor 3. This is going to be the last layout of this type of layout. Once we get to the 4th floor, we are going to enter what I call a cross section floor. And I'll kind of talk about that when we get to it. So what you really don't want to see in Ordeals is huge rooms like this, or really twisting and winding paths. You really don't want to see grid-like construction either. While a grid-like construction can really help you if you are going the wrong way to get back on track, it's just a lot more area to kind of cover. Winding and twisting paths are pretty bad because you have to travel a long way. And if you do go the wrong way, like if that long twisting path for some reason doesn't lead to the exit, which does happen sometimes, you're going to be walking a long way to get back on track. Ideally, though, I mean, the exit is either in the room you spawn in or like one room over, but that's really unlikely. At least for these floors. So continuing on here, kind of just again, looking all over. I think at this point in the video, I was remarking at how insanely bad the room layouts had been up to this point. But yeah, I'll be real, it gets kind of frustrating sometimes. Like, there's still time to save inside of EXA. There's still time to save in Neo as well, but a lot of the time in Neo to save is related to getting better floor layouts in Ordeals. So, for both of the games, this is a major problem. Way more so for Neo, though, because in Neo, you have 3 10-floor dungeons to go through. So, a lot of randomness. And in 2 of those dungeons, you actually have the possibility to get killed on every single floor. In this game, as far as the danger in Dimension X, the dangerous parts of Dimension X don't start until floor 6. And the main things you're concerned about in floor 6 are elite harpies. The Elite Harpies have a flying drill attack move, and that drill attack move can deal damage very, very quickly, and they have very, very high attack rates at that. So it can kill you in about a second. Luckily, Holy helps combat that because you can knock them away and knock them up in crowd control. You notice that the Lizard Elite Knights also hit for quite a bit of damage right now, but they're fairly reactable. You get a good, 2-3 seconds before they're going to kill you. So as long as you have your finger on the healing button, you should be fine. So this is the cross-section room. You're seeing these little teleporters that are bringing you back to the central room. There's 4 paths, one going down left, up right, and down right. There is a exit down one of the paths. In this case, it was to the down left. If you do not go down the right path, you'll get a blue teleporter that leads you back to the beginning. So ideally, you get it on the first path you pick, but it's not uncommon to get it on your second or third path. And honestly, I've oftentimes got it in the fourth quite a bit, which is kind of frustrating, but it happens. Luckily, cross-construction rooms or cross-section floors are relatively short. And since it teleports you back to the middle, it usually doesn't take that much effort to kind of get back on track. So there is a scroll that you can use in order to improve Gadford's abilities, but I don't pick it up because we're not going to be using Gadford, so it's just a waste. I also have a theory that even if you don't equip the specific special ability on your guys, just having access to the book itself actually modifies the abilities that the character uses. I haven't 100% verified that, but I know that Falkland used to cast Avalon Nova pretty often for me, and ever since I stopped picking up one of his side path special ability scroll things, he stopped using it. So that's something that I wanted to do a little bit more investigation on. So now that we've killed off the Orc, who is the boss at floor 5, we need to start paying attention to make sure that we're not taking too much damage in the next floors. Again, the Elite Harpies are the main problems, but you do need to kind of pay attention to your life as you continue on. We got a Wind Garb to drop. That particular armor is a defensive upgrade in almost all cases, and it has S-rank speed. Wind Garb you could easily take until we start manipulating the gear in Diablo's Palm in Chapter 10, I believe it is. So, pretty strong piece of armor. And I think it looks pretty cool. I guess that's another big thing. In Neo, when you changed gear, it was actually fairly uncommon for you to visually change, and when you did visually change, it was usually pretty minor, like a texture or maybe a color swap. In this game, when you change armor, it could vastly change your character model, which is pretty cool. So we found that exit relatively quickly, which was nice. And we can move into the next floor here. So once again, Lizard Knights still do roughly the same damage, but they're more common in the lower floors. So they're another guy to watch out for, in addition to the Harpy Elites. So just kind of moving our way through things. Vampires tend to have pretty high attack, but with how we're built, it seems like they got a pretty huge nerf in this game compared to Neo. In Neo, vampires hit pretty heavily, like they hit like a truck. Not so much here for the lesser vampires. So just continuing to kind of run around. I know this room composition is just a room with many, many side routes. So I know that the probability of an exit being there is quite low, so I backtrack, and I end up hitting the exit as a result of that. So they are rather random floor layouts, but there are some commonalities. This is a 4 corners floor. So you start out in one corner of the map, and the exit will be in one of the 4 corners of the map. So in this case, I went down left, I saw that inside the room the exit wasn't there, so I don't need to explore anymore. I just continue on to the next corner. You don't need to go inside the center of the map at all. You just go around the perimeter and hope that you get lucky. It is possible to spawn immediately on the exit on these, which is kind of nice. 1 in 4 chance. But yeah, I don't even need to go to the full center of the room. Like, once I've seen the center of the room, I know that this isn't the room I'm looking for, and I can move on. Another commonality of the Four Corners rooms is the treasure chests that line the perimeter of it. When you break them, they are almost always trapped. So you want to try to avoid breaking them if you can. Particularly in Neo, less so in this game. This is the Fire Demon Balrog. He guards the silver metal in Dimension X. Since we have access to light magic, we're just going to shoot him with Gaia Nova and just completely roast his butt. Zero cycle. If we didn't have that, we would run the Aurora Bow and shoot him with that because he is immune to fire. So if we did fire out, we would use the Aurora Bow there, and that would be one of the other uses of it. You can still zero cycle him, but it's a little bit less likely with Aurora Bow. Just depends on kind of how he moves and how your companions support you. So now that we got the silver medal, Zenith repairs kind of the circuits for the energy generator and repairs it, and we restore power to the Geo Fortress proper. And now we need to start looking at a counterattack into Virulent to get rid of their dragon cannon before it fires on the Geo Fortress again. So now that we've progressed in the story a fair amount, the cannon now has the ability to shoot further into the world than before. Yeah, it's really stupid. Don't worry about it. But yeah, the cannon can now be used further out into the world than it could before. And we're going to use that to break a barrier to the next section of the game. It's those barriers specifically that kind of keep you, I think, from probably really breaking this game in half. The reason why it took us so long to get access to late game weapons is because this game gates off progress using the cannon. We don't really have a way to hit late game areas except for the Steel Ancient Arena, which is a doozy of an end game place, but everywhere else just drops like a bunch of mithril. I mean, that was kind of the big thing, is like when you open up chests in this game, it's very, very rare for weapons to be in chests, like almost non-existent. It's also, so like whenever you open a chest in the field, it's probably going to be armor, and you might get a large amount of mithril, but there's no weapons. In order to get weapons, you need to fight monsters or clear generators. So that's where the Steel Ancient Arena really came into its own. It is a place filled with high-level monsters that we're able to kill by exploiting attributes, and monsters can drop those late-game weapons. So that's a big difference between this game and Neo. In Neo, you could get anything. You could get weapons, accessories, armor, mithril. That being said, the drops inside of them tended to be structured. For example, in this game, certain chests might drop an accessory. Like, it won't necessarily drop a ring or a bracelet. It could be either of them, but it will drop those. However, most of the chests inside of this game are going to be just random armor. Like, it won't have any commonalities between them, and it could be for either character. There's only a few chests that break that rule. So here we got access to a wind charm, which is a pretty nice headpiece. And this wind charm happened, I think, to have a good casting ability on it, which is why we put it on. I mentioned that the bracelet has the ability to have plus 30 or plus 40% spell power. That is an attribute that also can be on helms. So in addition to helm quality increasing your spell power, it can also have the abilities that increase spell power by a percentage. Also, the wind charm increases your speed. It is an S rank speed on your headpiece, which is crazy. So you might be wondering, how are we fueling this high-level magic if you're not improving your MP, really? The reason for that is magic casting reduced the cost of magic, but in addition to that, we got a secret art called Divine Spirit earlier. What Divine Spirit does is it allows you to get a huge amount of MP, like 300, 400 MP on your headpiece as a secret art. And we used to use headpieces that would, or we used to use secret arts that improve magic resist or improve spell power. But now that we don't really need that, it's much more important to increase our sustainability in the field by having additional MP. Because again, goddess tears are not particularly prevalent in this game. So right now, as mentioned, we're running to the Fearlent border so that we can oppose the forces there in the Balkan Desert and destroy their cannon. It's actually what it's called, is the Balkan Desert. I'm not making that up. Not being cute or anything. In order to get there, we have to pass through a cave of undead. But considering we have light magic, I'd say that their goose is cooked. I don't know why a skeleton would have a goose, or why it would need to cook it, but let's not worry about that right now. So continuing forward, we are going to kind of break our way through some barriers that have locked off Fearlent. These gates are one of the main reasons you can't really get through this area that easily. These ones, in addition to having a hit amount, seem to have an HP amount as well. When I tried to break these in my early testing as a low-level character, it took a very, very long time to break them, and I had to use invisibility abuse. There is a spell in this game that gives you invisibility. That makes it so that enemies don't aggro you. However, since we're super strong and powerful, we don't care if they see us, because we'll just kill them anyway. Invisibility used to have a much higher use inside of Neo, and it still has some conditional uses with it, but eventually we hit the point where we had a similar issue with Neo, where we were just strong enough to where we didn't care if enemies saw us or not. We just smoked them. So whenever you blow up a barrier, Mithril drops on the ground. So we spend a little bit of time picking that up. Talking about improvements to the run, I feel like trimming the fat on some of the mithril and chest acquisition would help out quite a bit for speeding up time. But as mentioned, I just haven't quite worked out the exact amount that we need in order to progress with the game. At this point, it's just kind of a feel. Like, okay, I feel strong right now, and I'm hitting the metrics to be able to kill things that I need to kill in one hit. But I don't have like exact numbers in my head at any given time. The only exact numbers that I kind of have in my head are related to the early game and your defensive values at times. Like, for example, at this point, I know that I should have approximately between 1,000 and 1,200 defense to be safe. 900 defense is about what you run at the floors 6 through 10 in the Dimension X. So we're starting to run into Medusas. Medusas have the ability to petrify you. As mentioned, petrification is pretty dangerous because it leads to auto crits. So you want to try to avoid getting petrified as much as you can. If you look at my item bar at the bottom part of the screen, the fourth item going from left to right, it's like a blue square with a white X in it. That's a Charm of Flesh, or a defensive charm it's called in this game. It's called Charm of Flesh in Neo. That is a item that when you use it, it cures Petrify. It also puts a blue aura around you that prevents petrification for like 30 seconds, 40 seconds. Oftentimes, it's better if you know you're going to be fighting things that are going to cast Petrify on you to just use the defensive charm beforehand. That way you never get petrified in the first place. Otherwise, you could get petrified in such a way that you immediately get attacked by enemies and get killed. Again, less of an option or less of a problem in EXA by far. More of an issue in Neo. So here we storm the path. Normally I would break some of those cannons to get a little extra force energy, but since I was low on MP and low on goddess tiers, I decided to focus on the cannon and progress. Probably for the best, because right now I was actually very, very strong. Didn't really need to do that. But I also felt the pressure. I had known that I had lost quite a bit of time inside of ordeals. My ordeals did not, or sorry, my Dimension X didn't go great. So I wanted to make up some of that time where I could. And that included kind of avoiding picking up extra things here or there. So for now, bunch of trigger hunting here, just going to the right places inside of here, talking to the right people. Right here we have to talk to Cyril. We're going to grab some healing water next to her bed a little bit later on. So here they kind of have a moment where they talk about a little bit about their past. Cyril was raised by the master librarian inside of the Noswald Empire. So she's really in tune with like reading and books and finds it relaxing and finds them adventurous, things like that. Enjoys being a huge bookworm nerd, basically, in her time that she isn't being a soon. Then Toma basically talks about, I believe this is where Toma reveals that his people were kind of killed off in the conflict between Noswald and Fearland. But they both kind of resolve to continue to strive to prepare for the return of Malzatra. It's said that when both holy swords awaken, Malzatra will awaken, but so far there hasn't been any indication that Malzatra has awoken yet. So right now, Zenith is like, yeah, I forgot to tell you, but we're getting a distress call from a remote legion or a remote region in Noswald. And they're like, oh, okay, well, that's kind of weird. And then they look into engineering, and they realize that all the robots are going nuts because they are getting the distress call as well, and they're like trying to leave to assist whoever's sending it out. So it's going to be up to you to kind of make your way into Noswald and figure out where the distress call is coming from and either turn it off or resolve it. But we're going to take a slight detour before that. So this is going to be another section where we're going to have some RNG manipulation. We are looking for a single drop, and we have 3 chests in order to get it. One of those chests has a very high probability of dropping a different armor, but there are only 2 things that can drop in that chest. It's the Ritual Robe or the Saint Armor. We are looking for Saint Armor. Specifically, we are looking for a Saint Armor with a modifier to HP. Usually it's plus 60%. Sometimes you get lucky and get a plus 80 or something. Quality isn't as much of an issue, but I've seen quality of the Saint Armor be as high as a plus 7. So it's always nice if you get a little bit of extra quality there, because that equates to more defense. The reason we're picking this up is this would be endgame armor. You do not pick up Saint Armor until at least Chapter 14, I believe. So we are getting this significantly more early than we should. And this armor is going to last us for a few chapters. This is a armor that I think maybe could be cut from the run, but I'm not fully convinced on it. After Chapter 10, you start to hit a place where enemies do get significantly stronger attacks. And as a result of that, it can be worth your while to invest a little extra time getting this defensive upgrade. So we go off to the side here and break that canyon because we're going to go through there to reach Diablo's Palm. However, we take this slight detour to grab the warp for the Sandworm Ancient Arena. It's going to become more relevant later on. That warp is going to save us time in a later chapter as well, because we'll be able to go to it when we're making our way into the magma prison. So here I actually go AFK for about a minute to go to the restroom. This is actually totally fine, because if you look at the upper left where it says can't use and there's an X over it, that's the cannon. The cannon has a recharge time when you use it, so I'm not really losing that much time because I need to wait for that cannon to recharge before I can progress into Diablo's Palm fully. So I'm going to lose a little time here, but nothing too excessive. I move into this cave here as well because this cave is totally safe. There's no monsters inside of here. So pretty much at this point, this is where I'm starting to lose actual time because now the cannon is fully recharged. But I mean, you know, I feel like you lose more time if you don't go to the restroom because your focus gets drawn away from the game and could potentially lead to you dying or just making poor decisions. So I think taking a small periodic break helps. That's where your co-pilot comes in too. You know, you get your co-op partner to mash through text or something or run you to the next area. So here we're going to use the cannon to blow up the entrance to Diablo's Palm. So Diablo's Palm has the highest level enemies in the normal world. I believe it has the highest level enemies in New Game as well. It's not until New Game Plus that I think you hit higher level enemies. So they're pretty strong and they're pretty dangerous. Luckily, we're not going to fight any of them. The 3 chests we're looking for, this is one of them. I unlock the chest and then I return to create a save. The chest contents are rolled upon opening the chest, not upon unlocking it. So as mentioned, we have 3 chests in order to get the Saint Armor. The armors these things drop range anywhere from Chapter 12 all the way to Chapter 14 or 15, I think. Evil Crown is a nice headpiece, but if it doesn't have any high magic damage, like this Wind Charm has, then it's completely useless to us, so we don't really care too much. Geo Headgear is nice. That's a helmet for Toma. The few enemies he has left that he's going to fight are going to be robots, and Geo Headgear helps to kill robots quicker. So that final chest can be a ritual robe most of the time, but it can also be a Saint Armor. So that's one of those chests that's relatively consistent. This time it was a Saint Armor, and when we identified it, we actually got lucky. That Saint Armor is +7 and 80% HP, so that is a fantastic pull out of that chest. As mentioned, we could do anything from a normal Saint Armor. We just want to have a Saint Armor with a little bit of HP on it. Because our defense is going to be better because of the Saint Armor. Like, the Saint Armor is going to give us a huge defensive increase by just wearing it. So we just want to make sure our HP is high in case we get elemental damage that spikes us. So just a little bit of menuing and kind of moving things over there. So here I'm checking over a couple of the headpieces to see if maybe I can get a magic percentage on one of those. So it's kind of like every time... So I'm not obsessively looking for the magic modifier on a headpiece. But, you know, I take a look at it. Every time that I'm going to buy items from the shop or identify, I can really quickly check Cyril's stuff to see if maybe he's selling something good. Because at this point, we have the weapon we need. We have the armor that we're going to need. We have a really good bracelet that gives us spell power. Really the only thing we're lacking right now, or that could effectively make us more powerful in a meaningful way, is access to a headpiece with percentage magic damage. And they're uncommon, but you can get them to drop here and there. So I got this dark magic maybe a little bit early. I didn't necessarily need it right now. But I figured I had some extra points, so why not use it? Make sure that I don't kind of build myself into a corner. Again, one of the advantages of light is that you only need light spell magic and dark spell magic. That's actually kind of dangerous there. Again, any of these things hitting us could probably kill us. Funny thing about worms, when they dive, for some reason, the damage is like zeros. I have no idea why that is. So after we've gotten that, we got a little bit of extra mithril that were in deposits inside of Diablo's Palm as well. So at this point, we have endgame armor. We're going to take this armor almost to the very last section of the game. In Chapter 13, we will be swapping it out. As you could see, we got kind of lucky with the spawns there, but usually you can get a Sane armor to spawn within about like 3 to 4 resets. So it usually doesn't take that much effort. We purchased a Blizzard Book. We're going to use Blizzard Book to cast level 2 Ice Spike. That's going to let us break this treasure chest encased in ice. The reason we do it here is we're going to have to wait for our cannon to recharge anyway, once again, so this is just something we can do in the meantime. Inside of that box that was inside of the icicle, we got access to 3 light charms. So that extremely powerful item I spoke about before that grants invincibility, we got 3 of them in a single chest. And we're going to put those to good use relatively soon. So this is going to be the fence that I was referring to, where we would have to wait to get our cannon to recharge anyway. Sure enough, it is still recharging a little bit. That guy was kind of a jerk and knocked me down, but it's okay. And there we go. Perfect timing. Got it back just as it finished up. So we used to continue down right to fight a prison of rock, and at that prison of rock was a defensive increase secret art called Steel Body that increased your armor. We skipped that because of the new routing. In the middle chest, once we broke that, we got access to more darkness runes, so that means more ancient arenas we can do. We also picked up a Charm of Light in that cabin that we took a side trip to. Right now we are scaling the mountain of Gradium Mine. At the top of it is a Vampire Ancient Arena. We are going to do this Ancient Arena. The reason for that is it is very quick to do, and it gives you a lot of mithril. So pretty nice stuff. We do not need to grab the warp here, because we're not going to be returning up here afterward. I use a defensive charm here. There are vampire lords, which are the sword guys in the center here, with wings. Those guys can petrify you, and they actually have very, very high critical rates and very high critical coefficients and very high base damage. They can also float you, and when you're floating, like knocked up in the air and juggled, you can take additional damage. So we want to make sure that we don't get petrified and play safely around them. The Vampire Lord boss at the bottom of here could actually kill us, despite us having very strong armor at this point. So we do need to play a little bit carefully around him. So we did pretty well there. You'll notice I have Duga in my party. Honestly, I just forgot to take him out over the course of this, but it really doesn't matter. At this point, we're strong enough to where it doesn't matter if we're running Maybell or Falkland. So we're just kind of rolling through this pretty easily. So now that I cleared Vampire, we're going to go back down the mountain, and we're going to make our way over to a teleporter. The reason we hit the warp is that so that we can quickly get back to this area when we're done doing what we need to do. The reason we are going to wait to do an additional couple of Ancient Arenas is, once again, we're going to run into a situation where there's two barriers we need to break with cannon. We're going to break the first one, and then while we're waiting for the cannon to recharge, we might as well do something in the meantime. And in that case, we're going to be completing two of the end game Ancient Arenas. Stone Ancient Arena and Worms, Sandworm Ancient Arena. So what stone is, it isn't things made of stone, it's things that can petrify you. So a lot of Medusas, a lot of high-level demon succubi that have that have petrify abilities, demon vampire lords that we saw inside of the Vampire Ancient Arena as well. Because of that, and how dangerous they are, we're actually going to use a Charm of Light in the bottom floor in order to clear that arena much earlier than we should be able to. We're going to be doing a similar thing with the Charm of Light for the Sandworms. The first floor of Sandworms is relatively easy, but the bottom floor contains worms that quite a few of them can one-shot us for a large portion of the game. But we do have the damage to be able to deal with them since we have Avalon Nova. So now we're just waiting for this to blow up so that we can teleport back to base and hit the Ancient Arenas. But yeah, same idea for that one. We're going to hit the bottom floor and use a Charm of Light so that we can finish that arena. So reasons why we do these two arenas. So for Stone, Stone gives you a huge amount of Mithril. It also gives you a Chaos Breaker, which is the strongest normal new game weapon for Toma in the game. Toma still has to fight like one or two more things, so we give him a nice weapon to kind of take to the end of the game. It also drops a secret art for your shield that increases your resistances to many different types of magic and many different types of physical ailments as well. So very, very strong thing. We're going to be replacing that on our Cyril shield soon enough when we get an opportunity. So these guys are still dangerous. I'm keeping my distance because their attacks could potentially one or two shot me, even without being petrified. So I want to take this kind of carefully. The reason we do worms, the Worm Legion Hive, also gives us huge quantities of Mithril as well. It also gives us access to Goddess Blessing. Goddess Blessing is the best defensive secret art for armor in the game. Debatably the best defensive one, period. It gives you an enormous amount of armor. I mentioned Steel Body used to be in the route. The reason we kick Steel Body out is because now we can get Goddess Blessing early. And Goddess Blessing gives you like 800 armor, which when you're talking about a end game, we have between 4,500 and 6,000 armor. An 800 armor increase is enormous. So nice and easy. Just kind of scooping that up. We're going to be going to the Worms Ancient Arena next. And then once we do Worms, we're going to kind of equip all that stuff that we need, and then we're going to move on to continuing the main quest, which is breaking the next barrier and making our way over to the distress signal. Funny enough, we won't be equipping the defensive increase, the Goddess Blessing, until a little bit later. Right now, our defense is pretty strong for story critical things. So we want to keep Quicksilver on our armor in this case, just so that we increase our run speed. Sane Armor has S rank speed as well, though, so you don't lose too much if you don't have that. So, I mean, right now we're rocking triple speed. We got Wind Charm on our head, we have Quicksilver on our armor, and we have Sane Armor. So lots of speed, lots of zoom. Lots of prominent girl trot from Cyril. Yeah, her run animation is it's a pretty definite girl trot. So this is the bottom of the Worm Ancient Arena. We are going to use Avalon Nova, which is the charge attack on Gaia Codex, to be able to petrify the worm and deal damage. Avalon Nova is very strong per hit, but also the petrification keeps the worm from diving underground and stopping us from dealing damage to him. If I did not have Gaia Codex, I might do this later for fire when I have access to better weaponry to deal with this. I think I'd probably wait an additional 1 or 2 chapters, and at that point I would use Necromancer, which we're going to be picking up pretty soon, to use Chaos Gate, which is a dark magic petrify spell. All right, making our way over to that warp that I had picked up, and we're back on track. So we're going to be picking up 2 more Ancient Arenas before we continue on to where the Distress Call is coming. Both of them are on the way. One of them is the Succubi Arena, and the other one is the Skeleton Arena. Succubi Arena is pretty safe. There is a couple places where you could take significant damage, but considering we kill things so quickly, since they're weak to light magic, we're not in any real danger. Skeleton is ridiculous, but I'll kind of cover that when we get to it. The rewards for Skeleton are not even remotely proportional to how easy it is. So I think for this video, we're going to get through Chapter 10, and after that I'm going to make a cut on this, just for convenience sake. And then we'll go ahead and make the last video kind of finishing up the last bit of the game. So here's the Succubi Ancient Arena. Fully doing a number on these. I mean, you can see I'm doing like 30,000 damage, which each pulse. The Life Dringer in the middle there has significant magic resist, which is why she doesn't die super fast. The boss of this is also a Life Drinker, so for that same reason, it'll take a little bit more magic to kill her. But as you can see, Gaia Nova is quite strong. Quite strong. So one of the nice things about Succubi Arena is it gives you access to the Quickness Ring. The Quickness Ring is a ring that gives you a good amount of magic damage just on the ring itself. It increases your speed, once again. And the attributes on this tend to be pretty good. For example, this one we got HP 60. And that's fantastic, because getting HP on both your armor and your ring means that you're in a good position to be able to survive elemental magic attacks. But I've gotten some really nice quickness rings before. I've seen like double HP 60, which is crazy. You could also potentially get intelligence modifiers on there. Like you could get intelligence plus 30 to 50%. That would increase your magic damage, but it wouldn't be as important as you might think, considering how strong we are at any given time. I'd much rather have the HP at this point. Unfortunately, rings in this game cannot get magic power. Only bracelets can. So that is a slight difference from Neo. So yeah, just pulse once, instantly kill everything in the first floor of skeletons. And then now we're just going to walk down and pulse and kill everything in skeletons at the bottom floor. Even if I ran fire, that would still be ridiculously easy. And it is insane. You get like, I think it's somewhere in the vicinity of 150,000 mithril for just that small investment in time. In addition to that, you get the Necromancer book. Necromancer is a dark magic book of spells. It allows you to cast Dark Arrow, which is a multi-hit darkness attack, and it allows you to cast Chaos Gate. Chaos Gate is similar to Gaia Nova. It's an AoE spell that causes petrification, but it's dark magic aligned. Necromancer is important for the fire route for dealing with the Sandworm Ancient Arena, but it's relevant for both runs in dealing with Mithril Golems. And Mithril Golems are one of very, very few enemies in the game that are light element aligned. So you cannot deal any damage with light magic. Also, Mithril Golems have very high defense and very high resistances to other magics that aren't dark. So you really want to get that Necromancer book to be able to clear them out. So now we've opened the path to the kind of place where the distress call was coming from. And at first it seems almost like kind of an ancient temple, but then it kind of opens up and you start to see a more technological tinge to it, which is quite a bit weird. We also start to notice that there's fallen robots here. You can reactivate these robots in order to have them help you fight, but we really don't need to do that. We can just kind of continue on. The enemies in here are called legions. That's the type of enemy. They play a prominent role in Shining Force Neo. Not so much in this one. So we back here so that we can clear out our inventory, but also... Wow, that was kind of funny. So there we actually got a bracelet that had 40% magic power identified, but we already had our 40% magic power bracelet, so... I mean, awesome, you know? It's some nice breakable mithril or some nice money if we want it. Once again, just checking to see if we have access to a headpiece with some magic power to it. We're going to be increasing the power of our thing periodically here and there through Gentetsu. Near the end of the game, we want to have a Gaia Codex that is preferably around plus 10 in progression. Other than that, we would spend money potentially increasing the power of a headpiece if it has the magic bonuses we need, and normal armor. Every once in a while, I used to increase shield a little bit for more defense towards status or physical status resistances, but since I've kind of moved away from that. So the Necromancer book we got is also kind of nice. It was a +5, which means that we don't have to spend extra money at Gentetsu raising it up. You want to have something around a +3 or better for the rest of the game. So here we're investing in some HP boost. HP boost isn't the best of Force Arts, but it's definitely a lot better than it was in Neo, just because of the way it scales in this game. Also, in addition to that, even though my defense is really high, and we are starting to get some HP percentage bonuses, you can still always use a little bit more survivability through health in case you run into multiple elemental sources trying to spike you down simultaneously. And I mean, you can see, like, a lot of this route and Neo's route really hinge on trying to increase your survivability once you've reached a threshold of power. So it's all about hitting breakpoints both offensively and defensively. Here we take a small amount of time to break these boxes. This is one of 2 armories in this section. The armories have high-level weapons that have high modifiers. Usually they do not have attributes on them, but you can still sell them for quite a bit of money at the shop. And that can help to kind of smooth out any money difficulties you have from this point on. Since my money is relatively good, I only farm that armory. There is actually a second armory that you could visit, but it would also require you to usually make a return trip to town because you'd fill up your inventory too quickly. So this is a Legion Mother. It's nice and easy, clear her out. and continue on to the source of the distress call. So the boss of this area is a Valkyrie. If you were paying close attention in the Steel Ancient Arena, you might have seen it as one of the enemies in there. It is robot-based, and it does shoot light-based attacks, but it's not strong to light element, particularly. So that allows us to fight very comfortably with Gaia Codex. As you can see, it shoots Gaia Nova. Luckily, its spell power isn't particularly high. I filled up my inventory here, which is expected when you hit the armory, so I'm trying to get rid of some lower quality items that I know aren't going to sell for much, so I can pick up those. And now we're going to see the source of the distress call that has been going on for many hundred years. And it's this machine. So this is Adam, which if you're familiar with Shining lore, Adam is usually like a caretaker of the Holy Sword, Shining Force, or the Chaos Breaker, or any number of other MacGuffins. He's usually the caretaker of that stuff. In this game, he's supposed to be the caretaker of the first wielder of the Holy Sword, who has long since died. In that time, he continued to fight Malzatra's minions in that broken down ruins that he was left in. And he's like, I'm a huge, big, strong guy. Like, I ended up running out of power, not dying. I ran out of power after killing, like, 12,000 of these minions. And you're like, wow, that guy sounds pretty strong. He's not really that strong. Well, if he is strong, he's not strong enough to qualify dropping our over level 100 companions. So, kinda doesn't matter. So, Ragnadam is now inside of Cyril's room, and he reveals that the way that he is able to make his way into the Geofortress so easily is that they're really poorly protected from the air. So he literally just flies his airship in and, like, takes a rope ladder, I guess, and just goes through the balconies. So here, Ragnadam says, why don't you just give me the Holy Sword? You know that the Holy Sword is going to lead to your death based on the curse of the Heritors. And she goes, I know that it's going to get me killed, but it's a responsibility that I have to have. And he says, well, you know, if you want to discuss it, here is the Royal Imperial Gem. If you have this gem, you will be allowed to go into the Noswald Kingdom, and you'll be able to speak to me. And then he leaves, after kind of very creepily hitting on her. Cyril goes downstairs, notices that Toma was passing by and heard them talking. He's like, what the heck? Why are you talking to him? Like, it can only lead to bad things. And he's like, and what's this thing about the curse of the Heritors? And she's like, don't worry about it. And he's like, I'm really worried about it because you said it's going to lead to you dying. And she's like, no, it's fine. And he's like, no, it's not fine. And he gets mad and leaves. That's a summary breakdown of what happened. So it's here that we learn that Rimshion can actually take control of other Magnus remotely. So she has taken control of Amataleri and has been using her to spy on Toma and the others. And here, she is going to use Amataleri in order to enact a kidnapping plan on Toma. So, another reason not to really use Toma for the speedrun. For Chapter 11, Toma is incapacitated. He is kidnapped and you cannot use him. This does not happen for Cyril. So, yeah. If we had focused on Toma, we would have to still hedge a little bit of power towards Cyril to be able to save him. Because you share mithril totals, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but it's yet another reason why Cyril is kind of our preferred party member here. So, we know that he's been taken to the Magma Prison in Firlint. In order to get into Firlint, though, there is a large gate that is guarded by the Magnus. Amataleri feels awful for having a part in this kidnapping, and she says, I can get you in there. I can get you into Firlint. So we are actually going to put her into the party, because you do need her in order to get past the initial gate. Right here, we're going to equip some of the special tactics on characters that I mentioned. We're going to sell off some stuff that we don't need. That counter sword was at 10k, so that's another change in mithril. So a lot that it can sell for, but we don't really need the money right now. We would like the 10k mithril, though. Once again, just very quickly checking to see if there's any headpieces that might have special attributes we want. We also pick up more defensive charms. Unfortunately, defensive charms are really expensive as well. Like, they're 20,000 gold a piece, I believe. And you do need a fair amount of them. So here we're just kind of finishing up the last little bit before we make our way into Fearlent. We'll be wrapping up this video once we hit the Fearlent gate and get into it proper. Very quickly just dumping off core metal into the machine. We don't necessarily need to upgrade this, but we want to get the core metal out of our inventory. So this is where we save a little bit of time by getting the sandworm warp. By warping here, we don't have to go all the way across the desert again. And this is going to allow us to move into the final section of this desert. Small detour for a little bit of mithril here. And so, this Magnus guarding the gate. And Amataliri's like, hey, open up. And he's like, I can't. The Levi said not to. She's like, freaking, I'm stronger than you are. That's our laws. You do what I say. And he's like, okay, I'll open up the gate. Just don't tell Rimshion. That's how you get in here. As you can see, Toma's sleeping on the job inside of Magma Prison. Once he gets up here, he realizes that he's trapped in, and Rimshion goes to greet him and says, well, you saw that Ragnadam wanted Cyril to join him and bring his, or use her shining force for the glory of the Noswald Empire. Don't you think it's reasonable that you should join us? Because both countries should have access to the shining force in order to have equilibrium. So, like, if one person has one, then the other has to have the other, or else, like, it's just going to be all-out war and chaos and genocide. But Toma says, no, I trust in Cyril. And we now cut to Cyril making her way up the mountain to the Magma Prison. But we're going to go ahead and stop the video right now, and we're going to cut this so we get a nice clean cut. See you guys in just a bit.